What would you do if someone tried to blackmail the King of England over a balcony? Let that sink in for a moment. We're not talking about jewels, money, or even a throne. We're talking about a balcony, a slab of stone and marble that has become the stage for centuries of royal triumphs, tragedies, and symbolism. And yet, in this latest dramatic twist, Meghan Markle is said to have demanded access to Buckingham Palace's most sacred viewing platform, tying it to something far more sinister. And King Charles? He's furious. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Now imagine the scene. The balcony has seen kings and queens wave after coronations, monarchs reassure a nation during wars, and newlyweds beam with joy on their wedding days. It isn't just architecture, it is legacy carved into stone. To stand on that balcony is to tell the world, I belong. But does Meghan belong? That's the heart of this explosive standoff. You see, Meghan Markle knows how to command attention. Love her or hate her, she's a master of optics. She understands what a single photograph can do, how an image can go viral and shape narratives for years to come. And so, when whispers emerged that she had issued a so-called balcony demand for her next UK visit, jaws dropped. Why would she risk it all for this? Why push a king, newly established on the throne, into such a corner? The answer, my friends, is where this story gets truly shocking. The introduction to this scandal doesn't begin in London, though. It begins in California, in Montecito. Picture Meghan sitting in her lavish mansion, surrounded by PR advisors and strategists. Every move carefully orchestrated, every public outing weighed for impact. And at the center of it all, one burning question. How can Meghan reclaim her place on the world stage? For Meghan, it seems, the balcony wasn't just about visibility. It was about reclaiming legitimacy, about forcing the world to see her not as an outsider, but as an equal to the royals she left behind. But let's step back for a moment. Why is balcony access such a big deal? Some of you might be asking, it's just a balcony. Who cares? Oh, but here's where the symbolism becomes impossible to ignore. In the royal family, not everyone gets balcony privileges. It's a privilege reserved for the inner circle, the core royals who carry the weight of the monarchy. Being up there isn't just about waving. It's about being recognized as part of the heartbeat of the institution. Diana stood there. Kate has stood there. Charles has stood there since childhood. And Meghan? Well, she hasn't, at least not in the way she wanted. And that brings us to the first shocking twist. Insiders claim that Meghan didn't simply ask to appear on the balcony. No, she allegedly tied her request to a thinly veiled threat. A whisper that if she were denied, she had information, material, or stories that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy. Blackmail, in other words. The kind of tactic that doesn't just anger a king, it enrages him. Now pause for a second. What could Meghan possibly have that would make King Charles feel cornered? A private letter? A recording? A secret conversation that was never meant to see the light of day? And why weaponize it now, at this precise moment? The tension between Montecito and Buckingham has always been palpable, but this demand feels like the moment the Cold War turned hot. It's not hard to imagine the fury inside the palace walls. Advisors huddling together, Camilla demanding action, William stepping in to protect the institution, and Charles himself, boiling over with rage. After all, to him, the balcony is not negotiable. It is the crown. It is history. It is bloodline. To hand it over under the weight of a threat would be unthinkable. But let's not kid ourselves here. Meghan is not naive. She would have known this demand would trigger an earthquake, which raises an unsettling possibility. Did she want this exact reaction? Did Meghan calculate that by enraging Charles, by daring him to push back, she could once again dominate the global headlines? After all, controversy has been her currency, and every time the palace recoils, her name climbs. Still, the question lingers. Why now? Why, after years of distancing herself from the institution, does Meghan suddenly want that prime balcony shot? Could it be tied to image rehab after years of criticism? Could it be a way of reminding Netflix, Spotify, and Hollywood that she still carries royal weight? Or could it be something darker, a way of forcing Charles to acknowledge her and Harry's children in a way the monarchy has been reluctant to do? And here's the kicker. What if Meghan's demand wasn't even about her? What if this balcony showdown was really about Archie and Lilibet? By forcing Charles's hand, Meghan could have been trying to guarantee their recognition, ensuring that their place in the royal pecking order was undeniable. That's not just a PR stunt, that's legacy warfare. Now let's pivot. Imagine you're King Charles in this moment. You've waited your entire life to wear the crown. You've weathered scandal after scandal. And just as you begin your reign, a daughter-in-law who stepped away from the family is now threatening to leverage her influence for a piece of royal real estate in the sky. How would you respond? Would you give in, hoping to silence her? Or would you risk her unleashing whatever threat she claims to hold? This, my friends, is the impossible choice that allegedly ignited Charles's fury. And make no mistake, Charles's fury isn't just about Meghan. It's about the monarchy itself. The balcony has always been reserved for those who serve the crown, not those who challenge it. For Charles to give in would mean setting a precedent. That blackmail works. That royal tradition is negotiable. And for a man who has waited 7 decades to embody the weight of that tradition, that's something he will not stomach. But here's where the story takes another twist. Because if Charles says no, and palace insiders claim that he already has, what happens next? Does Meghan back down quietly, accepting defeat? Or does she escalate, turning whispers of blackmail into full-blown revelations? That's the cliff we are standing on. And whichever way it falls, the world will be watching. This isn't just a fight over a balcony. It's a battle over symbolism, legacy, and control. It's Montecito versus Buckingham. It's Meghan's hunger for visibility clashing with Charles's determination to preserve the sanctity of his reign. And it's a reminder that sometimes the most explosive battles aren't fought with armies or laws, but with demands whispered behind palace doors. But let me leave you with this question. If Meghan truly has leverage strong enough to blackmail a king, what could it possibly be? A secret about Charles's health? A hidden financial scandal? Or something tied to Diana's legacy that Meghan knows the world would never forgive Charles for burying? That's the kind of revelation that would shake the monarchy to its core. And so we end our introduction at the brink of a storm. Meghan's balcony demand hanging over the palace like a dark cloud. Charles seething with fury. Advisors warning of fallout. And a nation left wondering, what happens if the monarchy caves? Or worse, what happens if Meghan goes nuclear? What happens when a single demand threatens to unravel centuries of royal tradition? That's exactly where we pick up. Meghan Markle's alleged blackmail over balcony access wasn't some minor request. It was a declaration of war. And as palace insiders whisper, the demand landed like a grenade inside Buckingham. But why a balcony? Why now? That's the question gnawing at everyone from royal historians to casual observers. To the average person, a balcony appearance might sound trivial. But within the monarchy, it is anything but. The balcony is a stage of legitimacy, the visual stamp of royal approval. When a face appears there, it's not just a person waving. It's a symbol declaring, this is who we trust. This is who represents us. So when Meghan tied herself to that sacred platform, she wasn't asking for a photo op. She was clawing for status. Now let's be honest here. Meghan has always been acutely aware of optics. Every outfit, every interview, every public gesture, carefully curated. Remember the Oprah interview? The black and white contrast of her dress, her choice of setting, her pregnant belly cradled for emphasis. These were not accidents. So imagine what a balcony appearance could mean in the world's media. One shot of Meghan standing beside Charles, William, or even Camilla would scream unity, forgiveness, legitimacy. It would rewrite the narrative in seconds. And Meghan knows it. But here's where it gets complicated. The timing of this demand couldn't have been worse. King Charles is still settling into his reign, navigating the skepticism of a world that has watched his every misstep since Diana. William and Kate are working overtime to project stability. And Harry, well, Harry's relationship with the family is strained at best, fractured at worst. So for Meghan to swoop in, demanding access to the most sacred royal backdrop, felt less like a plea and more like an ambush. Let's consider Meghan's possible motivations. Was this about personal vindication? Proving that despite walking away, she could still command the royal spotlight? Or was it about her children, Archie and Lilibet, forcing the monarchy to acknowledge them publicly? Many believe this demand wasn't just Meghan's vanity project. It was her way of etching her children into royal history books. because one image of them on that balcony would forever silence questions about their place in the royal hierarchy. But ask yourself this: why threaten blackmail to get it? Why not appeal to the king's sense of family, to his well-documented love of being a grandfather? Why not negotiate quietly? The answer may lie in Meghan's growing frustration with how the monarchy has treated her and Harry since their departure. Every olive branch extended by the palace seems to have been met with more scandal, more leaks, more battles. Perhaps Meghan decided that soft diplomacy was pointless, and only hardball could work. Of course, that gamble comes with massive risk. Because while Meghan is playing the PR game, Charles is playing the legacy game. To him, conceding would not just tarnish his reign, it would taint the monarchy itself. And so, according to those close to the palace, Charles's response was swift and furious. No chance. No balcony. Not now. Not ever. But think about the contradiction here. Meghan, who has often claimed to reject the confines of royal life, now allegedly fighting tooth and nail for the most royal stage of all. Doesn't that strike you as ironic? She walked away, yet she wants the symbol that says she belongs. She denounced the monarchy, yet she craves its validation. That contradiction is at the heart of why this scandal has exploded. Let's rewind for context. In 2018, just after her marriage to Harry, Meghan did stand on that balcony, briefly. It was during Trooping the Color, and the image of her beside Kate, Camilla, and the Queen was broadcast worldwide. But insiders claim Meghan was frustrated by how little attention she received. The world's eyes were on Kate and the Queen, not her. And since then, her exclusion from future appearances has been interpreted as a royal snub. Now, years later, the alleged balcony demand feels like Meghan's attempt to rewrite that humiliation. But here's the kicker. This isn't just about the monarchy and Meghan. It's about public perception. Because while some argue Meghan is fighting for recognition, others see this as yet another power grab. And in the court of public opinion, those optics could backfire. Imagine the headlines if she were granted access. Meghan wins balcony battle. Now imagine the alternative. King Charles stands firm against blackmail. Either way, the story isn't just about a balcony. It's about who controls the narrative. And then there's Harry. Poor Harry, caught in the middle yet again. Does he side with his wife, supporting her demand as a husband should? Or does he finally draw a line, realizing that pushing his father too far could permanently sever ties? Insiders claim Harry privately begged Meghan to reconsider, warning her that Charles would never yield. But Meghan, convinced that leverage was her only tool, pressed on. If that's true, it paints a tragic picture of a marriage where strategy outweighs empathy, and love is entangled in politics. Now let me ask you, what do you think Meghan's ultimate card is? If she's truly threatening Charles, what's in her hand? Could it be recordings from her time in the palace? Could it be personal letters that reveal Charles's vulnerabilities? Or is it something tied to Diana, the ghost that has haunted Charles's reign from the beginning? The possibilities are endless and terrifying. And don't underestimate the emotional stakes here. For Charles, this isn't just a political battle, it's deeply personal. Imagine being threatened by your own daughter-in-law. Imagine knowing that one wrong move could unleash secrets you've spent a lifetime protecting. That kind of pressure doesn't just make a king furious, it makes him dangerous. But here's where the twist sharpens. Some insiders whisper that Meghan's demand was never really meant to succeed. That she knew Charles would say no. That the true goal was to provoke him, to paint him as cold, unyielding, and vindictive. Because in the PR war, sometimes being denied can be spun as victimhood. And Meghan has played that card before. If that's the case, then Meghan may have set a trap, and Charles walked right into it. By refusing her outright, he handed her the perfect narrative, the cruel king denying a mother, a wife, a daughter-in-law. And with that, Meghan once again positions herself as the wronged outsider. But that brings us to the cliff we're now hanging from. Because if Meghan truly has leverage, if she truly has the power to blackmail the monarch, then Charles's refusal sets the stage for an explosion. And the question we must all ask is this: what happens if Meghan decides to pull the trigger? Why a balcony? Why now? Out of all the battles Meghan Markle could have picked with the monarchy, why choose this moment, this demand, this symbol? That's the question that keeps rattling around palace walls and echoing through the British press. And it's the same question millions of people are asking as they try to make sense of this outrageous situation. Let's dive into the psychology of it. Meghan has always understood the power of visibility. She's an actress by trade, trained to know where the cameras are, how to angle herself, when to smile, when to hold a dramatic pause. In Hollywood, the stage is everything. In royalty, the balcony is that stage. To Meghan, the balcony isn't just a structure, it's a throne in the sky. And right now, she seems to want that throne back. But why now, years after leaving the institution she once branded toxic? Because timing, my friends, is everything. Meghan knows the monarchy is vulnerable. King Charles's reign is still young. He doesn't command the same untouchable reverence as his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II. His approval ratings wobble. His health has been questioned. Add to that William's growing prominence and Kate's increasing public sympathy, and suddenly Charles's grip on the narrative looks shaky. Meghan may have sensed weakness, and like any skilled player, she pounced. Let's not forget, this isn't just about Meghan. It's about Harry, too. Harry has been drifting, caught between loyalty to his wife and yearning for acceptance from his family. Every rejection from the palace cuts him deeper. Could Meghan have calculated that demanding balcony access would force Harry back into relevance? After all, if the palace caves, Harry and Meghan would stand shoulder to shoulder with William and Kate. A symbolic reconciliation splashed across front pages worldwide. But here's where things get contradictory. Meghan has spent years crafting a narrative of liberation, breaking free from the suffocating confines of royal life. And yet here she is, allegedly demanding the most traditional royal platform of all. Isn't that ironic? She claims to reject monarchy, but she wants its crown jewel of visibility. Do you see the paradox? It's as though she wants to have it both ways. The freedom of California and the symbolism of Buckingham Palace. Now, here's a twist you might not have considered. What if Meghan's balcony demand isn't really about her? What if it's about her children? Archie and Lilibet have been largely invisible to the British public. Their appearances are rare, carefully curated, and often clouded in speculation. Meghan may believe that a balcony appearance, placing her children in full royal view, would cement their legitimacy forever. One photo of Archie or Lilibet beside King Charles would silence questions about their titles, their future, and their bloodline. It's not just optics, it's insurance. But let's ask the question no one dares say out loud. What if Meghan feels that without balcony access, her children risk being erased from history? Think about it. Royal history is documented through images. Queen Victoria on her balcony, George VI after the war, Elizabeth II waving during jubilees. These images endure for centuries. Without that stage, Meghan may fear her children will always be footnotes rather than headlines. And yet, here's the contradiction again. By demanding it through alleged blackmail, Meghan risks ensuring the opposite. Because if Charles digs in his heels, and insiders claim he already has, then the public will see her not as a protective mother, but as a manipulative opportunist. The irony is staggering. The very move designed to guarantee legacy could end up staining it. Let's pivot to Charles. For him, this demand strikes at the heart of everything he believes the monarchy stands for. To Charles, the balcony isn't negotiable. It's earned through service, not demanded through threats. By allegedly trying to force her way onto it, Meghan has triggered his deepest fear, that the monarchy could be reduced to a bargaining chip. Imagine being Charles in that moment, knowing that if you give in once, the floodgates open. What's next? Demands for titles? Security? Money? To him, this isn't about Meghan. It's about precedent, and he cannot allow the monarchy to be blackmailed. But here's where the human element kicks in. Charles is not just a king. He's a father. He's a grandfather. Part of him must ache at the idea of cutting Meghan out, because to do so is to cut out Harry, and by extension, his grandchildren. And yet the fury overrides the softness. Because to Charles, the monarchy is bigger than any individual, including Meghan, including Harry, including even his own children. Now let's not forget William. Oh, William, the heir who has made it his mission to protect the monarchy's future. To him, Meghan's demand is an insult not just to Charles, but to the entire institution. William has already been painted as the villain in Meghan and Harry's narrative. Cold, unwelcoming, even cruel. But here's the twist. Insiders say William was the first to tell Charles, no balcony, no chance. Why? Because William knows that if Meghan wins this battle, the monarchy loses its spine. And William, above all, is preparing for the day he wears the crown. But let's step back and look at the strategy. Could Meghan have miscalculated? Maybe she thought Charles would cave under pressure. Maybe she believed the monarchy, desperate for reconciliation optics, would bend. But what if she underestimated their resolve? The Windsors may have fractures, but when it comes to defending tradition, they close ranks. Could Meghan have unintentionally united Charles, Camilla, William, and Kate against her? That would be the ultimate irony, her demand designed to divide instead solidifying the palace's front. And here's another twist. Meghan's timing may also be tied to Hollywood. Think about it. Her Netflix deal under pressure, her Spotify deal collapsed, her popularity plummeting in polls. What better way to reassert her global relevance than by sparking a royal showdown? If so, then this wasn't just a family drama. It was a career move. Meghan may have been using Charles as a prop in her comeback strategy. Cold? Maybe. Calculated? Absolutely. But imagine the backlash if that's true. Imagine the outrage of the British public, already skeptical of Meghan, seeing her allegedly use the monarchy not as family, but as leverage. This could backfire spectacularly, feeding the narrative that Meghan is not a victim, but a manipulator. And yet, here's where the emotional punch lands. What if Meghan truly believes she's fighting for survival? What if, in her mind, this isn't manipulation, but desperation? Think about the isolation, the rejection, the constant media attacks. Could she feel that forcing her way onto that balcony is the only way to protect her children's place in history? In that light, the demand doesn't look ridiculous, it looks tragic. So we circle back to the original question, why a balcony? Why now? Because for Meghan, it's not just about waving to the crowd. It's about rewriting history, about forcing the monarchy to acknowledge her on her terms, about ensuring that her children are etched into the royal narrative, whether the palace likes it or not. But here's the cliffhanger. Insiders whisper that Meghan didn't just demand the balcony. She allegedly went further. She had a speech prepared, a moment scripted, words she planned to deliver, not just to the crowd gathered below Buckingham, but to the entire world. And if that's true, then we're not talking about a photo op anymore. We're talking about a coup of royal symbolism. And what Meghan planned to say from that balcony would shock everyone. What could Meghan Markle possibly say from that balcony that would terrify Buckingham Palace? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't money, land, or even power, it's reputation. And in the royal family, reputation is everything. Lose that, and you lose the crown itself. Let's talk about blackmail. Not in the shady gangster sense, but in the way reputation is used as leverage. Think about it. Meghan doesn't have armies. She doesn't have legal authority. What she has is influence, stories, perception, and those can be deadlier than bullets when aimed at a monarchy already fragile under scrutiny. Now, what might she hold over King Charles? Insiders whisper about letters. Private letters exchanged between Charles and Meghan during those tense early years. Some allegedly filled with promises, others with apologies. Imagine if even one of those surfaced, painting Charles as weak, manipulative, or even dishonest. What would that do to the fragile image he's tried to build since taking the throne? But it doesn't stop at letters. There are whispers of recordings, conversations Meghan might have documented, moments behind palace walls where words were exchanged that the public was never meant to hear. A private remark that could be twisted, a hesitation that could be spun as cruelty, a tone of voice that, once broadcast, could confirm every accusation she's ever made. Doesn't that possibility send a chill down your spine? And let's not forget Diana. Diana's ghost has haunted Charles's life for decades. Meghan, often compared to Diana, could weaponize that legacy. What if she hinted at conversations where Charles allegedly disrespected Diana's memory? Or worse, moments where Charles revealed vulnerabilities about how the world sees her? One strategically leaked anecdote could reopen wounds Charles has worked decades to heal. Here's where it gets darker. Imagine Meghan holding not just secrets about Charles, but about the monarchy's finances. The monarchy thrives on an illusion of stability. But what if Meghan had proof of money being funneled in questionable ways? What if she hinted that taxpayer funds were used improperly? Even the suggestion could erode public trust, sending shockwaves through Parliament and the press. And yet, let's pause. Because Meghan doesn't even have to reveal the material. The mere threat is enough. The palace doesn't know what she has. They don't know if she's bluffing. That uncertainty alone is devastating. It forces Charles to weigh every move carefully, always wondering, does she really have the receipts? Or is she playing a game of shadows? Think about how reputation works in this family. Prince Andrew was all but exiled after his scandal. Edward VIII abdicated when his reputation clashed with the crown. Diana's Panorama interview shifted global sympathy overnight. Reputation can crown a monarch or crush one. And Meghan knows this, which is why her alleged blackmail isn't about money. It's about perception. But let's not overlook the irony. Meghan, who has often painted herself as a victim of palace cruelty, now allegedly using the very tactics she condemned. Isn't that a contradiction? Isn't that hypocrisy at its sharpest? She once accused the monarchy of silencing her with threats, and now she's accused of threatening them in return. It's a cycle of fire feeding fire, and no one escapes unburned. Here's where it gets personal. Imagine Charles, late at night, pacing the halls of Buckingham. He's waited 70 years for this crown, only to be backed into a corner by his own son's wife. Imagine the humiliation, the fury, the fear that his legacy might collapse under a single leak. This isn't just political, it's psychological warfare. And let's not forget Harry. If Meghan is holding cards, then Harry is the dealer. Without his insider knowledge, Meghan wouldn't have access to the palace's inner workings. Which begs the question, how much has Harry told her? And does Charles now see his own son as a liability, a Trojan horse within his family's gates? That thought alone would be unbearable. But here's the twist. What if Meghan's blackmail isn't about the past, but about the future? What if her threat is, let me and my children onto that balcony, or I will never stop talking. I will keep telling stories, giving interviews, writing memoirs until your monarchy is buried under scandal. That's not one revelation. It's a lifetime of pressure, a war of attrition, a slow bleed of reputation until nothing is left. Can you see why Charles is furious? To him, this isn't just a demand. It's extortion of his legacy. It's the threat of death by 1,000 cuts, each one delivered through headlines, documentaries, and viral clips. The monarchy may have weathered wars and abdications, but has it ever faced a social media-savvy duchess who knows exactly how to keep the world talking? And here's the contradiction that no one can ignore. If Meghan truly has damning material, why hasn't she released it yet? Could it be that she doesn't want destruction, just leverage? Could it be that she knows the moment she plays her trump card, the game ends? And so she keeps it in her pocket, always hinting, never showing. That's the genius and the cruelty of reputational blackmail. But here's the cliffhanger. Multiple palace insiders whisper that Meghan's most dangerous card isn't about Charles. It isn't about Camilla. It isn't even about Diana. It's about William. Yes, Prince William, the heir to the throne, the man who will one day wear the crown. And if Meghan truly has something on William, then this isn't just a balcony demand. This is a war for the future of the monarchy itself. And what Meghan is rumored to hold about William could be catastrophic. What happens when a monarch is pushed too far? When the crown itself feels cornered, trapped, forced into a position it never imagined. History tells us one thing. The palace strikes back. Always. That's exactly what insiders say unfolded after Meghan Markle's alleged balcony demand and her whispered threats about reputation. Up until this point, Charles had been a king of compromise, a monarch trying to balance tradition with modernity, forgiveness with firmness. But this was different. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a challenge to the very authority of the crown. And Charles, they say, erupted. Picture the scene. Buckingham Palace late at night. The grand hall's quiet, but the private chambers buzzing. Advisors rushing in and out. Phones ringing off the hook. William and Camilla called into urgent meetings. And at the center of it all, Charles, furious, pacing, his voice sharper than anyone had heard since the Diana years. One insider allegedly described it like this. He wasn't just angry. He was humiliated. To him, it felt like Meghan had spat on the crown. And humiliation is dangerous fuel. Because when a monarch feels mocked, the response is never small. It is calculated. It is decisive. And it is ruthless. So how did the palace strike back? The first move, according to whispers, was to close ranks. This is something the Windsors have perfected over centuries. They may bicker, they may feud, but when the crown is under attack, they lock arms. William, who had his own reasons to distrust Meghan, was the first to speak. He told Charles flatly, "If you give in to her now, you will never control her again." That, insiders say, sealed Charles's resolve. But William didn't stop there. He reportedly suggested a counteroffensive. Subtle leaks to the press painting Meghan as unreasonable, manipulative, and desperate. Sound familiar? The British press suddenly filled with stories about Meghan's ridiculous demands, her tone-deaf insistence on balcony appearances, and her obsession with status. Coincidence? Hardly. It was the palace flexing its muscle, reminding Meghan that two can play the reputation game. Now let's bring in Camilla. Camilla, often painted as cold or calculating, but in reality, fiercely protective of her position. Camilla, according to insiders, urged Charles to be firm. She allegedly told him, "If you bend to her once, you'll bend to her forever." And Charles listened. After all, Camilla knows better than most what it feels like to be vilified in the press. She had survived her own public crucifixion, and now, she wasn't about to let Meghan rewrite the monarchy's rules. But here's where it gets interesting. Charles didn't just lean on family. He leaned on advisors. Men and women who have served the crown for decades, who understand the delicate dance between public perception and private crisis. They reportedly outlined 3 options. Give Meghan what she wants and hope she quiets down. Ignore the demand and risk her unleashing her alleged threats. Go on the offensive, make it impossible for Meghan to win. Charles chose option 3. That's when the leaks intensified. Headlines about Harry's loneliness and Meghan's desperation for relevance began dominating tabloids. Suddenly, stories emerged about Meghan being uninvited from future royal events. The palace, without ever issuing a direct statement, began shaping a narrative. Meghan as the aggressor, Charles as the dignified monarch refusing to be bullied. But let's pause here. Doesn't this strategy carry its own risks? By escalating against Meghan, wasn't Charles feeding her narrative of being victimized by the institution? Wasn't he playing into her hands? That's the contradiction at the heart of this story. Both sides thrive on conflict. Meghan needs the palace as her foil. The palace needs Meghan as its villain. Each attack fuels the other. And yet, Charles wasn't satisfied with leaks alone. Insiders claim he authorized something far more dramatic: contingency plans. In case Meghan escalated, the palace began preparing legal options. Lawyers were allegedly consulted about defamation, privacy breaches, even security threats. Imagine that, King Charles weighing lawsuits against his own daughter-in-law. The absurdity is Shakespearean. And yet, that's how high the stakes had climbed. Now let's talk about William's role in this counteroffensive. To him, this wasn't just about Charles. It was about the future. William reportedly told advisors, if she gets that balcony, she rewrites the line of succession in the public's mind. Think about that for a moment. One photo of Meghan, Harry, Archie, and Lilibet beside the king would make them look like the natural next generation of royals, overshadowing William, Kate, and their children. William wasn't just fighting Meghan. He was defending his children's inheritance. And here's the emotional gut punch. Imagine Charles caught between his eldest son and his youngest. William demanding strength. Harry begging for compromise. Meghan threatening exposure. Charles torn in half. The crown on his head, but his family crumbling around him. Doesn't that image strike you as tragic? But tragedy has never stopped the Windsors from striking back. And so the palace doubled down. They began briefing select journalists about new traditions, hinting that future balcony appearances would be restricted to working royals only. This was the masterstroke, because by framing it as a matter of tradition, not Meghan, the palace could deny her without naming her. Cold, clean, effective. And yet, Meghan was not deterred, because just as Charles was tightening the palace walls, Meghan was allegedly preparing her next move. If the monarchy thought they could shut her out, she would show them just how loud her voice could be. The counteroffensive was underway, but the real war was only just beginning. Because Meghan's next move would not just threaten Charles's reign, it would shake the entire monarchy's foundation. What happens when a palace war collides with Montecito's strategy room? When centuries of royal tradition slam headfirst into Hollywood-style PR spin. That's the battlefield we step onto now. And make no mistake, this wasn't just Charles versus Meghan. This was Buckingham Palace versus Montecito, each side armed with its own weapons. On one side, marble pillars, centuries of protocol, and the silent strength of an institution that has outlasted wars and abdications. On the other, Meghan Markle, armed with cameras, interviews, and the insatiable appetite of global media. The palace fights with silence. Meghan fights with exposure. Two completely different playbooks. But only one can dominate the narrative. So let's picture it. In Montecito, the sun-drenched California mansion becomes a war room. Meghan at the center of the table, flanked by her PR advisors, attorneys, and strategists. Harry slumped in his chair, torn between loyalty to his wife and a lingering desire for his father's approval. Meghan's voice sharp, decisive. If they shut us out, we go louder. If they paint me as unreasonable, we prove them wrong. Does that sound like someone backing down? Not a chance. Meghan has built her entire public brand on being heard when silenced, on speaking when told to stay quiet. To her, Charles's fury wasn't a stop sign, it was a green light. Every royal leak against her only confirmed her favorite narrative, that she was the outsider, the truth-teller, the woman bold enough to stand against the crown. But here's the contradiction. For someone who insists she doesn't want the crown, doesn't want the titles, doesn't want the monarchy, why fight so hard for the balcony? Why demand the symbol of everything she claims to reject? Isn't that hypocrisy? Or could it be that Meghan doesn't want the monarchy itself, but the image of monarchy, the photo op, the global stage, the story that can be sold, streamed, and monetized? And then there's Harry. Poor Harry, caught in the middle of the storm. Insiders whisper that his heart is split down the middle. On one side, his father, the man he once idolized but now resents for never fully protecting him. On the other side, his wife, the woman he's sworn to defend, no matter the cost. Imagine being Harry in those moments. Meghan demanding balcony access, Charles slamming the door, William digging his heels in. And Harry left, once again, as the man between worlds. Now here's where things get fascinating. Meghan allegedly told Harry something chilling. If your father denies us, we still win. If he allows us, we win even bigger. Think about that. To her, either outcome was victory. Denied. She plays the victim, fueling her narrative of oppression. Granted, she claims triumph, parading across the balcony as though she'd never left. It's the ultimate win-win strategy. And Charles, in his fury, may not have realized he was walking into her trap. But the Montecito counterattack didn't stop there. Meghan allegedly began drafting statements, interviews, even outlines for a new documentary segment. She wanted to frame this balcony standoff as a larger story, not about one appearance, but about a monarchy clinging to outdated rules, a monarchy afraid of a modern woman's voice. Imagine the Netflix headline, "Shut out of the balcony, silenced again." Doesn't that sound like instant clickbait? Meanwhile, Harry reportedly made quiet phone calls, reaching out to old friends in the palace, pleading for compromise, asking if there was any way his father might soften. But here's the tragic twist. The more Harry begged, the more Charles hardened. Because to Charles, every plea confirmed that Meghan was pulling the strings. And the more Charles saw Meghan's fingerprints, the less willing he was to concede. Now think about the optics Meghan was preparing. A carefully timed interview. A clip of her speaking about the balcony with sorrow in her eyes. A pause. A sigh. A subtle tear glistening as she said, "All I wanted was for my children to be seen as part of their family." Can you picture it? Millions would sympathize. Headlines would erupt. Hashtags would trend. That's Meghan's battlefield, not the halls of Buckingham, but the feeds of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And here's the irony that twists the knife deeper. The more the palace tried to ignore Meghan, the more powerful she became. Silence, once the monarchy's greatest weapon, now worked against them. Because Meghan thrives on silence. It allows her to fill the void with her own narrative, her own words, her own truths. And in the echo chamber of social media, her voice carried further than Charles's silence ever could. But here's the emotional spike you didn't see coming. Meghan wasn't just fighting for herself, or at least, that's what she claimed. Insiders suggest she positioned this entire battle as a fight for Archie and Lilibet. If we're denied, she allegedly said, then they're denied. If I don't fight for this, who will fight for them? To Meghan, the balcony wasn't a stage, it was a legacy. A promise that her children wouldn't grow up erased from the history books. And that's where the emotional weight lands. Because whether you love her or hate her, every parent can understand the instinct to fight for their children's place in the world. But is that what's really happening? Or is Meghan wrapping personal ambition in the cloak of motherhood? That's the contradiction we're left to untangle. Now let's zoom out. On one side of the Atlantic, Charles was sharpening the monarchy's defenses, ensuring no outsider could breach the balcony. On the other side, Meghan was preparing her counterstrike: interviews, leaks, whispers of revelations that could embarrass the crown. The battle lines were drawn. And then came the chilling rumor. Insiders whisper that Meghan, in her war room, raised the stakes. She allegedly told her advisors, "If they think this is about the balcony, they're wrong. If they push me too far, I'll bring out the truth about Archie and Lilibet." Wait, stop. Did you catch that? The truth about Archie and Lilibet. That, my friends, is the nuclear option. Because nothing rattles the monarchy like questions of lineage. Bloodline is the monarchy's foundation. Shake that, and the entire structure trembles. And so the stage was set. Montecito ready to unleash its most dangerous card. Buckingham Palace preparing for the storm of storms. But what Meghan did next would send shockwaves not just through Charles's reign, but through the entire world. What happens when a balcony demand turns into something far bigger? A full-blown war over history, money, and the monarchy's survival itself. Because let's be clear, Meghan Markle's alleged threat wasn't just about standing on stone beside Charles. No, it spiraled into something much deeper, much darker, and far more dangerous. Every scandal in the royal family eventually ties back to two things: legacy and money. And this fight, it had both tangled together like barbed wire. Let's start with legacy. The balcony has always been about history. From Queen Victoria waving after the Crimean War to Elizabeth II smiling during jubilees, the balcony photographs endure. They become the pictures in history books, the moments schoolchildren study, the images that shape how generations remember a monarch. So when Meghan demanded her place there, she wasn't asking for a wave. She was asking for permanence in history, a cementing of her narrative. But here's the twist. At the same time Meghan was allegedly demanding this balcony access, whispers began circulating about money. Netflix, Spotify, the brand, the empire of Montecito. Meghan's star, some say, had dimmed. The big deals weren't paying off the way they once promised. Viewership numbers weren't matching the hype. Public support in both the UK and US had started to wobble. Could this balcony demand have been less about royal symbolism and more about financial survival? Think about it. A single balcony photograph of Meghan, Harry, Archie, and Lilibet alongside King Charles could have been worth millions. Literally millions. Netflix would have snapped it up as the climax of a documentary season. Tabloids would have fought for the rights. It could have reignited brand Sussex overnight. Isn't it chilling to think the demand might not have been about family at all, but about market value? And this is where the contradictions pile up. Meghan has long claimed she wanted to escape the monarchy to build her own path. Yet here she was, allegedly clawing back into the monarchy's most prized symbol for the sake of optics and, perhaps, cash. Doesn't that reveal a deep irony? Rejecting the crown, but cashing in on its image. Walking away, but never letting go. Now, the palace understood this. Don't think for a moment they didn't see the bigger picture. Advisors to Charles reportedly warned, this isn't about reconciliation. This is about commodification. They believed Meghan wasn't asking for family acceptance. She was angling for global branding. And once again, Charles's fury ignited. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because the money whispers weren't just about Netflix deals. They were about charity funds. About the constant cloud hovering over Meghan and Harry's foundation. Questions about how funds were managed. Allegations of blurred lines between personal expenses and charitable ventures. Imagine if Charles suspected Meghan might tie her threats not just to balcony access, but to money trails linking back to the monarchy itself. That would explain why his anger seemed so raw, so uncontained. Let's pause and ask the audience directly. Do you think Meghan's demand was about family, or do you believe it was about money and survival? Which makes more sense? Because if we strip away the emotion, the timing is almost too perfect. Montecito under financial pressure. Public image slipping. And then, suddenly, an explosive demand for the most bankable photo op in the world. But it wasn't just money or legacy. It was both. And that double punch made it impossible for Charles to ignore. If he gave in, Meghan walked away with legitimacy and a potential financial windfall. If he denied her, she threatened to unleash stories, documents, or recordings that could devastate his reputation. Either way, the monarchy bled. Now, here's where it gets almost Shakespearean. While Charles was digging in his heels, Meghan allegedly raised the stakes again. She linked the balcony demand not only to family recognition, not only to children's legitimacy, but to a threat of exposure about the monarchy's inner workings. She hinted, whether bluff or truth, that she had information connecting the crown to money mismanagement, backroom deals, and private conversations the world was never meant to hear. That's not just scandal. That's destruction. Imagine Charles's horror. For decades, he's fought to modernize the monarchy, to prove it has a place in a world that increasingly questions its existence. And now, his own daughter-in-law threatening to paint it as corrupt, manipulative, even fraudulent. That wasn't just an attack on him. It was an attack on the entire institution. And yet, doesn't it feel like Meghan's strategy was high risk, high reward? If she succeeded, she'd cement her place in history, restore her financial empire, and force the monarchy to acknowledge her children. But if she failed, she'd risk being branded a manipulator, a blackmailer, a woman who tried to hold a crown hostage. The stakes couldn't be higher. Now here's where the Netflix connection sharpens. Some insiders whisper that Meghan's team had already storyboarded the potential balcony showdown. Cameras ready. Editors briefed. Narratives drafted. If Charles gave in, the footage would serve as the triumphant climax of a new season. If he denied her, the storyline would pivot. Meghan silenced, victimized again. The outsider denied her rightful place. Do you see how it works? Either way, she wins. Either way, the footage sells. But think about this contradiction. Meghan once told the world she wanted a life of privacy, away from royal spectacle. And now, she allegedly wanted the grandest spectacle of all, the balcony moment. Doesn't that contradiction cut like a blade? The palace knew. They knew giving her that balcony wasn't just about one photo. It was about giving her ammunition for years to come. It was about giving Netflix its climax, giving Meghan her triumph, and giving Harry the illusion of vindication. And so Charles, William, and Camilla said no. Flatly. Unequivocally. No. But what happens when you tell Meghan no? Does she retreat quietly into California sunsets? Or does she double down, turning rejection into fuel? If history tells us anything, it's the latter. Meghan doesn't back down when denied. She escalates. She amplifies. She finds another way to make the story hers. And so here we are, perched on the edge of an even darker precipice. Because whispers suggest that Meghan, upon hearing the firm no, decided to prepare her revenge plan. Not just about balcony access, not just about Charles, but about the monarchy's deepest, most guarded secrets. And if Meghan unleashes what she allegedly holds, it won't just embarrass the monarchy. It could destabilize it entirely. Because the next move in this war wasn't about appearances anymore. It was about survival. And what Meghan did next was something no one saw coming. What could be more humiliating for a monarchy than a daughter-in-law scripting her own balcony speech? Just pause and think about that for a second. Not only demanding access to the sacred platform, but also planning to deliver words, her own words, above the heads of cheering crowds, with the King of England standing beside her. It wasn't just an act of defiance. It was an act of usurpation. This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Because according to whispers inside both Buckingham and Montecito, Meghan wasn't content with simply being seen. She wanted to be heard. She wanted to speak. And that, my friends, is where the humiliation for Charles deepened beyond measure. Let's rewind. Public appearances by royals are meticulously choreographed. Every wave, every smile, every glance is scripted down to the second. Balcony moments are silent affairs. Royals wave. They smile. They do not speak. Why? Because the balcony isn't a podium. It's a symbol, a declaration of unity, not individuality. To break that tradition would be to shatter one of the monarchy's last untouched rituals. And yet Meghan, insiders claim, drafted a short but powerful statement. Just a few sentences, but enough to shift the narrative. Imagine the scene. Meghan stepping forward, her voice rising above the crowd. Today I stand not only as a mother, a wife, but as proof that love and family can overcome division. Can you imagine the headlines? The images? The impact? Overnight, she'd rewrite history. But ask yourself, why would she want that so badly? Why risk the fury of the king? Why provoke William, who is fiercely protective of tradition? The answer lies in humiliation. Meghan understood something fundamental. The monarchy's greatest weakness isn't scandal, it's ridicule. To be mocked, to be embarrassed, to be made to look irrelevant or foolish. By scripting her own words for the balcony, Meghan wasn't just asking for inclusion. She was threatening to turn the monarchy into a stage for her own show. And here's where the contradictions surface again. Meghan, who complained of being silenced, now demanding to speak on the monarchy's most sacred stage. Meghan, who declared she didn't want the royal spotlight, now fighting for the brightest spotlight of all. Do you see how every move feeds the irony? But here's the sting that Charles couldn't ignore. Word of Meghan's alleged balcony speech leaked into palace walls. Advisors panicked. William was livid. Camilla was reportedly appalled. She wants to hijack the crown, one insider allegedly muttered. To them, it wasn't just arrogance, it was sabotage. If Meghan had spoken from that balcony, it would have been a humiliation so severe, so unprecedented, that Charles's reign might never recover. And yet, Montecito saw it differently. For Meghan, this was empowerment. She allegedly told her advisors, "They silenced Diana. They won't silence me." Do you feel the weight of that? She was casting herself as the continuation of Diana's legacy, the voice denied, the woman who would not be shut out. In that framing, her balcony speech wasn't rebellion, it was justice. Now think about the public. The crowd below Buckingham, packed shoulder to shoulder, waving flags, chanting. What if Meghan had stepped forward and delivered her lines? The crowd might have erupted. Cheers, tears, headlines exploding worldwide. Duchess speaks for unity. And in that moment, Charles would be reduced to a background figure in his own monarchy. That's the nightmare that kept him awake. And so the palace struck again, harder. Leaks about Meghan's ridiculous balcony speech plans began circulating. Tabloids mocked the idea. Late-night hosts cracked jokes. Meghan was painted as a diva, a woman obsessed with stealing the show. To Charles, this was defense. To Meghan, it was proof of persecution. Do you see the vicious cycle here? Every strike from one side fuels the fire of the other. But here's the emotional gut punch. Harry. Insiders whisper that when he heard about Meghan's speech plan, he froze. He allegedly told her, "They'll never allow it. You'll only make it worse." But Meghan refused to back down. To her, this was bigger than Charles, bigger than William, bigger even than Harry. It was about narrative, about legacy, about history. And Harry, once again, left torn between his wife's fire and his family's fury. And here's the question for you. Was Meghan's plan brilliance or madness? On one hand, a balcony speech would have been revolutionary, a moment of empowerment that broke centuries of silence. On the other, it would have been catastrophic, humiliating the monarchy on live television, reducing Charles to a footnote. Which do you see? But let's not ignore the darker undertones. Because whispers suggest Meghan wasn't just planning a generic speech about unity. No, she allegedly planned to drop subtle references, lines that could be interpreted as digs at the monarchy itself, words about freedom, phrases about truth, maybe even a veiled nod to the struggles she claimed she endured behind palace walls. That's not just symbolism, that's rebellion. And here's where the humiliation explodes. Imagine Charles's horror at the thought of his reign overshadowed by Meghan's carefully crafted words. Imagine William's fury at the idea of a woman he believes betrayed the crown, turning his family's balcony into her microphone. Imagine Camilla's cold fury, knowing Meghan might compare herself to Diana in front of millions. That humiliation is what united the palace against her with such intensity. But Meghan, they say, was ready for that too. She allegedly prepared a fallback. If denied the balcony, she'd deliver her speech elsewhere, perhaps outside the palace gates, perhaps in a media interview aired the same day. In her mind, she couldn't lose. Either she spoke from the balcony and shocked the world, or she was silenced again, and her victim narrative grew stronger. Either way, the monarchy looked weak. And that's where the story tilts into tragedy. Because the monarchy, once untouchable, once feared, was now reduced to a pawn in Meghan's PR strategy. Charles furious, William defensive, Camilla icy, and Meghan smiling in Montecito, knowing she held the power to humiliate them simply by speaking a few words. But what no one expected, what came next, was Meghan allegedly tying her balcony speech plan to something even more explosive. Not just a message for the public, not just a statement about unity, but a revelation about the monarchy itself. Because Meghan's rumored speech of truth included one line that would shake the palace to its very foundations. What is a balcony, really? To most of us, it's stone, marble, iron railings. A place to lean, wave, maybe take in the view. But to the monarchy, that stretch of stone above Buckingham's gates is more than architecture. It is a throne in the open air. A platform that transforms flesh-and-blood royals into living symbols. And this is exactly what Meghan Markle understood better than most. She wasn't fighting for a photo op. She was fighting for power. Because the balcony is more than a stage. It's a battlefield of symbolism. Every appearance there cements who belongs at the heart of the monarchy and who does not. Diana's appearances there turned her into the people's princess. Kate's warm smiles on that balcony made her Britain's future queen in the hearts of millions long before the crown passes. Even children, George, Charlotte, Louis, have been etched into history by standing on that ledge and waving tiny hands at the roaring crowd below. Those images matter. They endure. They define. So when Meghan pushed for balcony access, it wasn't about reconciliation. It was about rewriting history. If she could stand there, with Harry, with Archie and Lilibet, then no matter what Charles or William said, no matter what the tabloids screamed, the world would see her as a royal equal. Not an exile, not an outsider. Equal. But here's the contradiction. Meghan has repeatedly said she wanted to break free from the monarchy's suffocating grip. She claimed she was tired of being controlled by symbolism and tradition. And yet here she was, clawing to control the very symbol she had rejected. Do you see the irony? She didn't want to be trapped by symbolism, but she wanted to own it. Now let's dive deeper into why the balcony frightens the monarchy so much when it comes to Meghan. Because the balcony is not just about who stands there, it's about who doesn't. Exclusion is as powerful as inclusion. Remember Prince Andrew? Since his scandal, he has been kept away from that sacred space. That silence spoke louder than 1,000 press releases. The same with Meghan and Harry. By keeping them away, the palace signaled that they were no longer part of the inner circle. And Meghan knew it. She knew being left off that stone stage was the ultimate erasure. So how do you fight erasure? You demand the stage. You demand the symbol. You force your way into the frame of history. But Meghan's plan wasn't just about standing there. It was about weaponizing the balcony itself. Insiders whisper that Meghan saw the balcony as a visual checkmate. If she could get even one photograph of herself and her children beside Charles, William, and Kate, the battle was over. No denial could erase it. No press spin could undo it. That image would live forever. And the monarchy, whether it liked it or not, would be forced to share its legacy with her. Now ask yourself, doesn't that explain Charles's fury? To him, it wasn't about one demand. It was about a coup. A takeover of the monarchy's most sacred symbol. He knew that if Meghan succeeded, it would look like she had conquered the very institution she once rejected. That humiliation, that fear of being overshadowed on his own balcony, is what drove him to slam the door so hard. And yet, here's the chilling part. Meghan allegedly had backup plans. If she couldn't get balcony access, she could replicate it. Sounds crazy, right? But think about it. All she needed was the right backdrop, the right staging, the right camera angles. A mock balcony set up in California. Carefully shot footage. Images of her and Harry waving. Children in their arms, projected across the world with subtle symbolism. To the untrained eye, the difference would blur, and the message would still land. We are the true face of modern royalty. That's the level of PR chess we're dealing with here. Meghan wasn't just fighting for a moment. She was fighting for narrative control. And Charles, William, and the palace? They were terrified because they knew she could pull it off. Let's go even deeper into the psychology here. For Meghan, the balcony represented not just status, but redemption. Remember, her first appearance there, back in 2018, was brief. Overshadowed. Dismissed. She was a new bride, tucked behind senior royals. She didn't command the crowd. She didn't command the lens. That memory haunted her. And now, years later, She wanted a redo. A correction. She wanted the moment that was denied her. Except this time, she wanted to stand center stage. And this is where the emotional beats hit hardest. Meghan has often positioned herself as Diana's spiritual successor. And Diana's most iconic images? Many of them came from that balcony. Diana glowing on her wedding day. Diana comforting a nation during Trooping the Color. Diana's image captured forever in stone and photograph. Meghan, perhaps, believed that by claiming the balcony, she was claiming Diana's legacy. Isn't that a chilling thought? The monarchy sees the balcony as theirs. Meghan saw it as her inheritance. But here's the twist. Insiders whisper that Meghan's alleged balcony speech, which we uncovered in the last chapter, included a line designed to weaponize this symbolism further. A line that would have compared her directly to Diana. Like those who came before me, I stand here for truth. Imagine Charles's face hearing that. Imagine William's rage. It would have been a dagger in their side, delivered not in private, but before the entire world. And here's the contradiction we can't ignore. The monarchy's strength has always been silence. They let the images speak. Meghan's strength has always been words. She speaks, she explains, she reframes. The balcony was the perfect collision of those two philosophies. Silence versus speech. Symbol versus story. And Meghan's plan was to hijack both. Now think about the broader implications. If Meghan had succeeded, it wouldn't have been just a personal triumph. It would have been a symbolic dethroning. The balcony, meant to elevate Charles and William, would have elevated Meghan instead. And that's why the palace was petrified. Because sometimes power isn't taken with crowns or scepters, it's taken with a photograph. But here's the cliffhanger you didn't see coming. Insiders whisper that Meghan's obsession with balcony symbolism didn't stop at London. She allegedly began discussing an even bigger stage, an international stage. A balcony not of Buckingham Palace, but of Washington, D.C. Yes, you heard that right. The White House. Could Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, have set her sights on the ultimate balcony? And if so, what does that mean for the monarchy and for America?